We have Eric McCulley here with us. He is the project coordinator with the Utah Reclamation, Mitigation, and Conservation Commission, and he is going to be talking about the new Delta Dawn. So thank you, Eric.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Provo River Delta today and Utah Lake and the importance of rivers. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Jordan River Watershed, and the Jordan River Watershed Council. So really quick, who in here have I worked with? That's pretty good. The other half of you, maybe this coming year. One of the things I want to talk about, I'll call it the accountability pledge. I know a lot of times it's hard to figure out, like, what should I be doing? How can I help? How can I help the watershed? And what I've been trying to do, along with the work across the watershed, is help people identify things that they can do, and then also deadlines and milestones, and so we can all move the needle together, because it takes all of us to improve the whole watershed, and we can't do it alone. I'm only here because of all of you and all the work we've all done together, so I appreciate everyone's work in the past, and especially the stuff you're going to do in the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, it kind of has two names. One is Delta Go. The grand opening of the Provo River Delta project happened a couple weeks ago. I said, a long time coming, let's get going. And it's almost done. We actually got it opened, but we're still working. We wanted to make sure people had a chance to get in and take a look at things. Again, I work with the Utah Reclamation, Mitigation, and Conservation Commission. And last time I was here, I talked a little bit about the commission. We have a booth upstairs. We'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more about what the commission does. But we're part of the Central Utah Water Project, and we mitigate for the damages to the environment from the water infrastructure. How many folks are familiar with the Provo River between Deer Creek and Jordanelle? It's about 12 miles long and 1,600 acres, so that's one of our projects that we work on. Other folks in my office manage that. And then the Delta, we also have some projects on the Jordan River Migratory Bird Refuge. And a lot of folks I know have been out to the Migratory Bird Refuge over time. I've met people who, they're in their 40s now, and when they were in college or even younger, they were out planting trees on the Jordan River. And a lot of people have cut their teeth on the projects. But it takes all kinds of people, and it's gone through all kinds of things. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm not sure if this one's going to work. Do I have to turn this on? Let's see. Oh, on button. First step. All right, and that works. Okay, so one of the purposes of the Provo River Delta Restoration Project was to create areas for June sucker to rear, basically. Who's heard of the June sucker, right? And where's it found in the world? Just Utah Lake. So it's only one place, and it's in Utah. It's a fish that can survive out in the open waters of Utah Lake. It'll eat, zooplankton and other things like that in the water column. So it's not actually like a sucker that's down at the bottom. And so it has a very specific place based on Utah Lake, and it's evolved to be only in Utah Lake. And it was diminished to maybe 300 individuals on Earth, right? And how many people have heard about sage grouse, right? There's sage grouse, and how many sage grouse are there? Like 250,000, and people are worried about sage grouse. Well, this was 300 individuals, which is pretty close to the brink of extinction. And now it's come back to potentially over 30,000, maybe 50,000. And so it's a huge success as far as fish are concerned on bringing it back from the brink of extinction. Some of the issues of the June sucker were that we took the water out of the rivers And how do rivers work for fish without water? Not very well. And so one of the parts of our program, we actually bring a flow regime. We actually pay for water to be in the Provo River, which is the largest spawning river for the June sucker. And then we work on recreational improvements and habitat. And the delta was habitat for basically taking the little bitty June sucker that are like floating grains of sand, and then finding a place for them to grow into small June sucker or juveniles, and then become big enough to run away from the hungry fish. Many, many hungry fish out there, both native and non-native fish. And that's kind of part of the opportunity here. And so we work with a group of partners, Central Utah Water, and we're the Mitigation Commission. We're with the Department of Interior and the June Sucker Recovery Program. We also work with DWR and other entities on a lot of different things. And so this is approximate final construction. We're basically at the end of 2024, so we were able to get the majority of the delta open. And if you haven't been there, it's really cool. You can get on the water. There's boat ramp, and there's a lot of access to angling. You can actually get on the water and paddle out to areas to go hunting. There's on-water recreation. There's trails. About a 3.5 mile loop and all kinds of things. But we still have some other things to do on the old channel, the original channel of the Provo River, and developing long-term stewardship plans and engaging the public and hopefully you all some with the activities into the future. So how do you make a river, right? If there's not one there. Does this look like a river? Not quite yet. So we kind of designed this as a river. The river's actually right over here and where these trees are. And so, we had to actually use these swamp mats to build roads and worked our way back. And this is the final connection of the Provo Delta to the Provo River. This is after 4 years of construction and then connecting it up just a couple years ago in March. We used substrate that would be good for spawning, and then also some of these rocks. We protected the sides and things like that. And then, of course, it becomes a river, and just like that, just add water, it becomes a river. So it was pretty cool to see. And then what we were doing is these are where the flood berms were going to go, and it turns out it started to snow like crazy. And so we had to kind of scramble to get some of the flood berms together. But this is what it looks like this fall. It's got trails on both sides. And then these are a bunch of cottonwoods. And then we've got, it might not be longleaf pondweed, it might be horn pondweed, but there's a bunch of really good vegetation growing, and the fish, are able to find it. So this juvenile June sucker is what we're focused on. So for the Delta, we're looking for places that little baby June suckers need to grow and survive. So what kind of places do baby fish go to grow until they're big enough to run away? Grassy areas, underwater, right? It has to be underwater. Sometimes. Someone else? Anyone else know? What? Shade, sometimes, shade, yep.
I was going to say the exact opposite. I was going to say like
Shade and sun. Some of them, yeah, they do have to be in warm areas. The June sucker, they like to be in the shallow, warm areas that are productive, and they, they'll produce algae, and the zooplankton will grow, and things like that. So what they need is diversity of habitats in different areas that they go to. And then if the predatory fish can get in there, they need places to hide. And then, of course, they need water that's going to be there. It's not going to, a pond that's going to dry out, not so good. So a lot of our ponds are connected to the water. And we're trying to get the fish to go from really small to this size to bigger. So, and I don't think anyone started the timer, so maybe you've got the timer. Okay. Just let me know when I've got 10 minutes. So here's how you plan it. People envision it in their heads, and Tyler Allred and some other folks, and I don't know if Melissa Stamp is here. She worked with people to develop this with a large group. They modeled what it would be like if they dug all these channels and then Utah Lake came in, and this is pretty much what happened. And so at 89, which is the high stand of Utah Lake, it comes all the way up to here where we have a parking area and trailhead. And then I was talking to Elliot about these areas that are not inundated are pretty shallow right now. So if you're not in the middle of these channels, you end up getting beached in between the channels. So, but these channels are there. They're about 6 feet deep and 60 feet wide, and there's almost 5 miles of new channel. And this is all flat water and protected from Utah Lake. And it's going to be a really cool year-round resource. And then here's the original channel. So you kind of envision it and say, all right, yes, we can do it. And then you start to build. So there's 4 outfalls that connect the water to Utah Lake. We haven't seen it at low water yet. All we saw it was at high water. And so we don't know how much of a connection they're going to be at these, and that's something we're going to be watching. But so the channels, basically this pink line used to be a dike that was built to make it so we could use this area back here for agricultural purposes, and it was pumped out from the 50s at least, if not longer. But this all used to be part of Utah Lake. It's called Skipper Bay. So, so we built the channels, and then one year was the darker, and then these are islands, and then the next year was the lighter blue, and then we took out some of these plugs. We had to use those swamp mats for the whole thing. So 5 miles of roads built on timbers. That's a lot of moving timbers. There's a lot of sequencing, and the Bureau of Reclamation force account crew was really great to get this thing done. And then we, finished up the end, and then this is that last little piece that I was showing you there. So how do you create a river delta? Who can tell me? Where do you start? With a blank slate, what do you do? Dan, I know you know what to do, right? Yeah. And Dan's done a lot of this type of work as well, so he knows that and does it happen exactly how you envision it? It never happens how you think it's going to happen. But you start with a blank slate and you find whatever information you can. So let's go back to the 1800s, and this was just a hand-drawn map. This is the delta area, and this is the Provo River, but this is actually the entire delta. So it's swept out across a broad area. So you kind of start with history in mind, and then you come to reality of what about today. This is 1983, and here's the Provo Delta, where you can see it did get flooded. This is the original channel of the Provo River and Provo City here up to BYU. And so the plan was to kind of try to make it a little bit similar. So in 2020, it did flood in here because Utah Lake was up for a little while. And these are the channels that were envisioned. And then we started building, and over 4 years of building, started at the downstream end, built some channels, built some islands, worked our way up. They built a high school in the meantime and another road, Lakeview Parkway. And then this was 2022. You can see about 3.5 or so miles of channels, and there's still ways you can get around out there. And then this was the final work. And then we basically let the water in March 2023, and it filled right up, which was a bit of a surprise because it was down. The water was down for a long time, and then it came up really fast, and we had a historic year. So this is the transition from Provo Delta to the lake. You can see this is on a windy day, and what do you notice about the lake? It's got a lot of turbidity in it, and that's something I think that might be discussed in the next talk, right? A little bit. And so we basically have a connection here and water coming down. So this is just, adult June sucker research is one part of it. This is a big female June sucker that was found in the delta. So they found it immediately, and then this is kind of our precursor. So, you kind of think what you think it's going to be like, and then you start to build and see how it goes. So Utah Lake is really complex because the water goes up and down 10 feet, and Utah Lake Authority, basically, I think this is on their website, but it was in a downtrend in 2022, so you can see the water's going down. The elevation here is 4482.5 and 4485. Compromise level is 4489. And so this was 2022, good time to build it, and that's kind of exactly how we planned it, is the water to go down, and then we built it and the water came up. So this is the transition to the delta. You can see the dike that we took out, and then at higher water it's less, and then at even higher water you can't even tell. And but be careful if you're out there. There's no motorized boats allowed in here. But we have, retained some of the cottonwoods and some other things like that out here. So we had a huge year. Anyone remember that? Just a couple years ago. 900 inches at Alta. I mean, it's the new normal. And then, hey, the water came back up. But luckily, we were done with all the work we needed down really low. So it came back up to compromise level in 2023. And we actually had to scramble to get these flood berms put in. And we had to do some minor changes for the river. So here's the original river channel, and then we basically moved the whole thing over into there. And this is about 2,000 CFS coming through that right after we were done. So we were like, whew, we got it done. And since then, those cottonwoods came in and some other things like that, and the trails, obviously. So continuing to work on that. But the fish found it, which was really great. They were able to find it with no problems. So we had about 8 to 10 miles of new river channel. We lost about 300 feet of channel bank out of the entire thing, which was pretty good, we thought. So very small amount. Thank you, I got that. And so we just replaced it with this coir, and the designer said it actually improved the design. So, and then the cottonwoods happened to send their seeds out right at the right time, and we had thousands, hundreds of thousands of cottonwoods that are going to be, growing out there. Some of these have actually gotten flooded, which actually creates some decent habitat down under the water once they get flooded. And so we've also put over 450,000 plants in, and we're working on the original channel, making that an urban fishery and a recreation feature. So there's a bunch of really great things out there. So we've got our benches. This is a boat ramp that provides access to the delta. And then, the birds really like it too. We've got a pretty extensive bird monitoring program with the airport. And we built a wildlife viewing tower, which is really cool if you haven't been out there. And, we're taking down the signs. It's open to the public. So, and then this is out on Utah Lake, just right out towards the edge. So, there's been flooding in the past. This is 2011, and then this is now. So this is, the delta from an airplane about 3 weeks ago. So it definitely has changed the look of the land. We also had a June sucker bike rack fabricated by the local Caleb Money. He's the high school teacher. And Provo High School's off there in the distance. And then we had our land-based mascot, Leroy, the corgi. He showed up for the big event dressed as Chucky. I don't know, you can't see the knife. But that was, he was a real big star. And then we had the marching band for the grand opening. And that was the 26th or something like 25th and 26th of October. And we released some June sucker, and that's what it's like now. Getting out there, there's some benches. We also had some Native Americans doing some hand singing and then the BYU Mountain String Band for the big grand opening. And some people came down the river on stand-up paddleboards. I was on a boat myself, and that's where the band was. So pretty cool to go down there and get on the water. Sunrise on October 22nd, 2024. I was out there, and that is the new Delta Dawn. This is the view from the Wildlife Viewing Tower. There's Mount Timpanogos. And this is 2022 out there along the shore. This is actually the delta over there, and the lake was way out. And then this is October 2024. So that's the new Delta Dawn, and that's all I have for the presentation. I do want to mention, I want to have everyone come up with a goal personally that you're going to do, and find someone and tell it to them and tell them when you're going to have it done, and then start working on it. And I can be your accountability partner if you want, but maybe let's all figure out how to improve things. Thank you.
Any questions?
What's the carp situation out in the Delta?
They love it.
I bet.
It is abundant with carp. We're working closely with the June Sucker Recovery Program to identify ways to address the carp. You know, about 75% of the carp biomass was reduced through fishing out on the lake, but then the way that they were fishing it no longer became viable. It just, they couldn't get into the shallower areas. So they're looking at different technologies, including some of these traps. And, but yes, that's a huge challenge. The carp is still a continued challenge, and they're spawning out there. We're trying to figure out ways to address the carp and other non-natives. Pike, northern pike are really toothy fish, and some other non-natives out there. Any other questions?
I had a question about the 450,000 native plants that you were able to plant.
Yes.
What did that project look like, and where did the labor come from, and what challenges did you face with that?
So there was a contract that was let out over 4 years, and North Fork Native Plants out of Idaho and Spring Creek out of Heber basically propagated the plants, and then they had labor forces to come in and plant them. So in the last 2 days, they planted like 20,000 plants with 18 people out there at Spring Creek, and that's the last of it. The challenges are, you got to know where the water's going to be, and in the beginning, it was way down, and then it came way up, and now it's up again. And so the inundation of plants, the freeze-thaw, popping them out. So we'll go out there and we'll push them in, and we'll do all kinds of different things. So, but we feel like, and for 500,000 plants over 250 acres, it's not a huge density, and so it's really focused on the water edge. So the biggest problem is hydrology with Utah Lake. So.
Hey, Eric. So quick question. We built another delta, which wasn't mentioned. It was with the Hobble Creek Delta. It was a kind of an experimental approach. But the bottom part of that delta and the deeper pools that we built have all filled in.
Yeah.
What do we expect for the Provo River Delta?
Well, I know that the Hobble Creek was a precursor. It's about 10 times smaller, and that was considered in the design as digging the channels really deep, and there's a lot of deep pools out there, and there's a lot of capacity. I think there was over 400,000 cubic yards of material. I haven't calculated the amount of time it will fill in, but there's definitely a potential for filling of some of those areas, and that's just a challenge working in rivers today, and stormwater upstream. That's why we got to work up in the watersheds.
I was wondering if least chub were ever present in Utah Lake.
Ask that guy.
Great. That's exciting.
Ask Dan.
Hello. So it was my understanding that water over a certain elevation in Utah Lake almost functions as a reservoir and has been appropriated for irrigation. I was just wondering how that plays into where your new delta, like the elevation of where your new delta kind of connects with the lake, and if you guys have like rights regarding like, I guess like the interflow between those two bodies of water.
So Utah Lake is managed as a reservoir, and they hold water up to 4489. When it hits that point, there was an agreement called the compromise between the surrounding landowners and the water users that you can't make it any higher than that because it floods people out. It used to be much higher, but that was a negotiated agreement. And so the delta, the Provo River Delta, was designed at high water to be able to handle that, and then Utah Lake is connected. The berm that we have at the end is at 4488, and then the bottom of the channels is at 4487. And so that 87 will retain the water when Utah Lake is down another 5 or 10 feet to maintain those habitats, but it was designed to be dynamic. We have water rights in the river that is a separate program that we pay for water that bypasses the power plant, and there is water in the river. Right now, Central Utah Water Conservancy District is moving something like 40,000 acre-feet of water to Great Salt Lake. So it comes down through the Provo, out of Deer Creek, through the Provo, into Utah Lake, down to Great Salt Lake through the Jordan River. So just yesterday, it ramped up 150 CFS. But the water rights is different than our project, but it's designed to be at that high level, but then maintained at the lower level. We'll see what happens when there's 45 CFS in the Provo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys have done a lot of work, which has been really awesome. I was wondering a little bit if you have a little bit more detail on going forward the management, because you guys are doing a lot of work right now. So what does that look like?
So Division of Wildlife Resources will own the land, and over the next few years I'll be doing the due diligence for that. One of the parts of the due diligence is developing a habitat management plan that is going to work on invasive species, native species. It brings the fish in and it brings the hydrology in. Impacts of people out there, a little bit of an unknown, but how are they going to manage hunting? How are they going to manage fishing? All that stuff. We're putting that into the regulations with Division of Wildlife Resources. Utah County will own and manage the trailhead, and they've already taken over, which is really great. And so they manage all the trail, and that was a real big benefit for them. So we're gonna start doing a management plan. I'll call it an adaptive management strategy that is gonna involve all the different aspects as part of this due diligence. So that's what we're starting to work on in the beginning of the year. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for questions, but thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you all.